an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. It is June 19th, 2023. Welcome in. Welcome back. Yeah, we were off last week. Just decided to put tools down. Long story, but anyway, it sort of started and ended with COVID. and if you can listen, you can hear it's not quite gone away just yet. Both Annie and I had tested positive within a day of each other. Aaron and Jamie were here from the Halifax headquarters at Story Studio Network. We are all attending the Radio Days conference here in Toronto, held in conjunction with Canadian Music Week. And a lot of positives coming out of it, not the least of which was the conversations around the state of that industry, this industry, and how they're integrated. A lot of things to be worried about, though. We came off the conference, and a couple of days later, Bell Media announcing that they are not only slashing 1,300 jobs across the country, they're closing their international bureaus in Los Angeles and London, UK, shuttering 6 radio stations, and selling off 3 others. And I think the parting shot from one of these Bell executives in the reporting that was done on it was, we have to ask ourselves, is this really worth funding? That's the state of it right now. But for all of the doom, gloom, and hanging of crepe, there are opportunities there. So I think that the industry is in a place where it can sort of step back on its back foot, brace itself, and it's time for a change. And whether that's in the structure of the industry, whether that is, as I wrote in LinkedIn this weekend in response to Tony Chapman's piece, you know what? It may be that Bell and Rogers and Chorus are just not built to be in radio or television, for that matter, or news, certainly. Maybe they're in the wrong business, because if cutting is the answer to the problem, cutting is seen as a solution when large corporations want to be in a position of growth. There's a lot of cutting been going on for the last 10 or 12 years. Not a lot of growth. Maybe they're in the wrong business, and I say that with all due respect. Maybe it's time to rethink the landscape of ownership for radio television in this country. Doesn't mean Bell and Rogers and Chorus shouldn't and can't be involved in ownership. But why do they want to be in Winnipeg? Why do they want to be in Calgary, Edmonton? All due respect to those markets. But they deserve hometown attention. And that's what is going to make the difference. Is radio going to actually, be the long-term solution here? No, it's not really. But there are opportunities in all of those markets that lost radio stations over the last week to make it work. And I think it happens because, you know what? You get local ownership, local management, and there's some pride in the product. There's a connection to the community. And I know that sounds hokey, but it brings me back to the days when Don Lucy was the general manager at CHML in Hamilton. Don and I crossed paths. He was the GM when I was at Q107. And they labeled CHML for years as hometown radio. And his thought always was, if it's not hometown, then you've lost. And now we have all the formats like Funny, The Breeze. It's got nothing to do with the community you're in. Bring it back. Local ownership, regional ownership even. John Pohl is doing a good job at making local radio work in this country. Guy who came out of broadcasting, decided that he was going to get into business and did so. And he's making money. He's making business. He's making a good business at it. AM, FM stations. There are other guys like Ed Torres, who has a couple of radio stations in and around Toronto. The folks at Central Ontario Broadcasting. They own a couple of radio stations up in Barrie. They own Indy here in Toronto. They make it go because they can connect to the community. Right? And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a lot easier watching these guys grow the company, connect to the community, than it is to hear about 1,300 people losing their jobs and shutting down radio stations across the country. So we will likely have more to say about that in the coming days and weeks. Erin is just frothing at the bit. Might have to have her on to sort of vent a little bit of that steam as we go. But again, I think we need to look at this as a culture, as an opportunity, because we need to be in a place where we can have conversations about the issues that affect what you do, what your kids do, what your parents do, what your business partner does, what your spouse does, day in and day out. The things that will affect you here and there. And you're not going to get that on an FM music-driven radio station all the time. So there needs to be a place for that, and that's why we're here. This is Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Welcome in. I'm Dave Trafford. And here we are in this part of the world in Toronto, a week out from the election of Toronto's next mayor. And, you know, I have been saying this since it officially started, that the media focusing on the polls, and I get why you're doing it, but the polls, and we've talked to David Coletto at Abacus Data, and we've talked to our friend John Wright at Maru Public Opinion, both reputable researchers, pollsters, who are going to tell you that a robocall poll has little or no reflection of how people intend to vote. It has everything to do with name recognition. And I got to think, well, here we are, though, a week out, and Olivia Chow is still leading. It's because, primarily, the media covers the polls as if it is the blessing from on high. Think about it. Every time they report on the poll, Olivia Chow's leading the polls, Olivia Chow's leading the polls, Olivia Chow. Well, everybody knows Olivia Chow's name, and she hasn't done any work necessarily to have to get her name out there. I want to tell you the number that we should be worried about, that we have paid next to zero attention to in the mainstream media, and all due respect to my pals at the press gallery at Queen's Park and City Hall. But where's the worry about getting the vote out? Where is the worry to make sure that we have voter turnout here, that the next mayor, whoever that happens to be, has some legitimacy? And when I say that, I mean, look at the fact that we might elect a mayor who has 20% of the popular vote, and maybe we get 20% of the eligible voters to turn out. That's a fifth of the eligible voters in Toronto. And you're going to tell me that this mayor will have a mandate? The worry is getting the vote out. If you're listening now and you haven't yet registered, get registered. Make sure you're on the voters list. Make sure you find out what you have to do to vote in the city of Toronto. I don't care who you vote for, but get out there and do it. So a lot of the conversations and the debates have focused on the issues, although one of the debates of late focused on one particular part of the city, and that was Scarborough. And we have talked a lot about it over the past in terms of, you know, how the city of Toronto writ large ignores what is needed in the community of Scarborough at its own risk. That, in fact, you know, I just talked about all the potential off the top of this in terms of where this radio industry is going. We're sitting on this incredible amount of potential in Scarborough that, for whatever reason, whether it's planning, whether it's politics, whether it's social cultural stigma that has kind of grown up over the years, whatever it happens to be, it kind of has been put off the side of its desk. But not because guys like Dave Hardy haven't been banging the drum on it for years. Dave Hardy is at Hardy Stevenson and Associates, but of course, he and I crossed paths, gotta be now 12
at least 12 years.
15 years, 15 maybe. Yeah. When you were working with the Rotary Club and doing those deep dive research into what was going on in Scarborough. And Dave, it's good of you to join us. Thanks for starting your week with us.
Yeah, wonderful to be here, Dave.
So, you know, and this has been a long time, you know, chorus from you and the organizers and the community activists, particularly in Scarborough. Where, you know, it's not as if Scarborough's not getting its due. It's that the rest of the city isn't getting the full benefit of what Scarborough has to offer Toronto. Is that a better way of putting it?
Well, exactly. We've had, I think, four mayors over the since amalgamation, and that's that mayors are really important to cities. They're the only one position on council that can see the big picture and can notice and take care of the details. So we had almost an evolution in the growth of Mayor Tory, who when he first got elected, say, I don't get why Scarborough's complaining all the time. At the end, near the end of his term, he said Scarborough is the heart of the city, and it's culturally diverse. It's a great place for vibrancy, entertainment, great people. The diversity is makes it almost one of the most diverse places in North America, with Chinese, Tamil, Caribbean, Filipino, everybody kind of working together. So it's a place where everybody talks to each other, and people need to kind of have that as a start place in terms of why there's issues that need to be addressed.
Well, and issues that need to be addressed, and they aren't unique to Scarborough necessarily, but they are unique in as much as some of the focus in terms of how we develop community, create community, how we reinforce community, how we deliver the services from the city or from the province or from the feds, particularly, and a lot of that diversity comes into play there. And you and I have talked over the years in terms of the amount of planners who are involved in focusing on that stuff in Scarborough. Is there still that imbalance there? Because at one point, it was almost like one to I don't know how many versus those that were downtown at Toronto City Hall.
Well, we kind of joke that the only time we seem to see planners in Scarborough is when they're running for mayor. And I don't want to be disrespectful to my colleagues, but man, there's really a lot of extra runway for them to do a lot of good work in the community if they could get into the community and do that work. I would add, we need economic development as well. And we did a comparison with Peterborough, which is about a quarter the size of Scarborough, where they have about a dozen economic development staff. Scarborough, 4 times the size, has one. They used to have three, two left. They didn't replace those positions. Like one person to bring in business, to create jobs and so on, for a population that is larger than 3 or 4 provinces. That's not the way it should be.
Well, and where's the blind spot here? Because it's not as if, for want of trying, you and those in your circle have been banging this drum for a long time. And in fact, give her dues. Mitzi Hunter has been on the front lines in that and now running for mayor. I don't know that that's getting her any traction, though.
No, I guess the challenge is that you've got a field of folks that are kind of on the left and a couple that are kind of on the right, and I think you've got the left are kind of splitting votes and somewhat in the right as well. Certainly, Mitzi knows Scarborough, and that said, she's got to get votes from the core, and I think that's where all our work is right now. One thing that's missing though is that, and one of the first questions we asked when we did the debate is, there needs to be a vision about how to bring this city together, both suburbs and core, and I don't hear anybody coming up with that vision. It's the issues are getting defined by core area groups. They're not the same issues that need to be addressed in Scarborough.
So how do you pull that thread? I mean, you're looking at it from your planner's lens. How should we be looking at this?
Yeah, and so there's a number of topics I think that none of the candidates are talking about. In addition to the vision, we need somebody who's going to really pull people together and get partners, both at the other levels of government. And so that's really important. I think the former mayor did a pretty good job at that, as well as working with other municipalities. There's a big staffing issue at the City of Toronto. A lot of the senior positions have gone unfilled for an awful long time. The finances are not in good shape. Somebody really needs to speak honestly about the budget and raising taxes. we need somebody who can actually get out in the community. It was again, we couldn't get Olivia Chow to commit to even come to the debate in Scarborough, until the very last week, and yet, given that it has a quarter of the population and the most, again, diverse population of cities in North America, like, that should be her first priority, is to get out. I don't want to be critical of her or take positions of any particular candidate, but the candidates, the mayor, have to get out and into the community and then advocate for investment, for poverty alleviation, for dealing with challenge to food banks and all those issues that you need to get out into the community and address that.
Well, I started this rant by talking about the polls and how that, the media reporting on it just ends up being earned media for the candidates who are in the top tier, et cetera, because that promotes name recognition. And I worry that the big number that we are ignoring, not paying enough attention to, is to ensure that people get out and mark the ballot. Now, I know there's a huge effort going on in Scarborough, and it's been going on for a little while now, in terms of getting the vote out specifically in Scarborough. Give me a sense of, what the mood and the momentum around that is.
Yeah, it's I'm so thrilled at what's going on in the community. We started probably about just after the election was called, and we've been working hard over getting across two issues. One is that we have a voice, and the second is we vote. So that we have the voice happen with our debate, which is really well done. And after that, we moved into phase two. We have an unprecedented coalition of businesses, anti-poverty groups, ratepayer groups, food banks, cultural groups who've all come together. This is the first time I've seen this, and they're all working to get out the vote. So we have people putting, and the city staff have been generally good in helping us, at least from the clerk's office, because they want people to vote as well. But in condominiums, you'll go into an elevator and there's a "Get Out the Vote" poster up there. People are knocking on doors. There was a march of just to bring some publicity to the need for people to vote. So this is unprecedented in Scarborough, to try to get all these people who generally work together and talk to each other, but now we're moving in one common cause to get that vote up.
So how are you measuring? I mean, aside from being able to count the ballots at the end of the day on election day, how are you measuring your progress or your success as you go through this?
Well, first of all, it was really interesting when we had all the leading candidates on stage. I think the main message is kind of we get it, and so that's helpful even to those that may not be the mayor. At least they've come out in the community and seen what the issues of the community are. So that's a really good measure. So they know that we're here, we have a voice, and we're active, and hopefully we'll get better performance over the next term. Certainly, I took a look at the advanced polls, and the votes from Scarborough are up, which is great. We're up to about 21%. We could be a lot higher, but compared to in the past where we've been as low as 15%, that's a good stat in terms of getting people out. The fact that we brought all these folks together and working together, that will continue after the election. So, I would add the major anchor institutions, the hospital, university, community college, and they're all working with us as well. So you've got this big group. We all talk to each other. We all have huge networks, and we're, again, in the absence of support necessarily from staff and some of the political support, you've got the grassroots folks that are really working together very well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this or if you can measure it at all, but I'm thinking that the critical demographic here are two would be newer Canadians, one, but younger voters. Those are the people that we really need to capture their attention and get them excited and engaged about. I mean, you and I, Dave, can get down in the weeds on all this stuff as long as we want, but if our kids and grandkids aren't going to be the ones moving that ball up the rock up the hill, then we're not going to get very far.
Yeah, and we've been fortunate to have the University of Toronto Student Union. It's kind of leading a lot of this effort. It's a very animated group. It's a very again, there's a lot of folks from East Asia that are, and other parts of the world who are children of folks that immigrated last generation, who are very active. So I'm really happy. They helped us a lot with the debate. So I'm really happy to see them involved. And we have I don't know if I get you the Facebook post, but people holding signs of "I voted," young people, "I voted," I'm voting. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, and it sounds almost cliche, but when you start to get into some of these new Canadian communities and they're first generation Canadians, as you point out, and mom and dad have moved and brought them here for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is probably opportunity and a better life. That in some of the places that their parents came from, they didn't have the opportunity to actually cast a ballot as easily as they can here in this country. So I think, again, some of us will take for granted that you can vote. There's a certain grassroots enthusiasm because they understand that it's important. So, if you can tap in on that, holy cow, that's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, well, look, Dave, look I always like to use the example of the Tamil community. They came from a place of genocide. There were bullets flying when they left. If there's one of the Tamil community centers, they have the imagery of a large boat where at one point they somehow landed on the shores of Canada, literally. But over a generation, they've realized how important it is to be in Canada. They've started businesses. They're wonderful entrepreneurs. The kids are becoming very well-educated professionals. They're into public office, and that's a great success story. But other parts and other cultures in Scarborough are seeing that as well in terms of the Chinese community, the Filipino, the Caribbean, the African community as well. They're all active and they get it. The only way we're going to get success is we've got to be involved politically, and it is not big P party politics, but politically in helping our community.
Well, and to the point, you don't have to be from Scarborough to support this Get Out the Vote in Scarborough initiative, because you're not in Scarborough and I'm not there either. But I can see where wherever the push and support comes would be helpful. How do people help?
Well, I think the way they help right now, certainly you can find me on LinkedIn or my webpage and so on. We can always use volunteers over the last week. And it's the volunteers, I went out to a lot of my colleagues who, made strong statements about being supportive of, diversity, quality, inclusion. I said, great, guys, ladies, I'm organizing folks that are in poverty, racially diverse. I want them to get out to vote. I go, there's crickets.
Really?
So come on, guys, you made the commitment. Let's get out. So, we can always give them some jobs over the last week to help people get out to vote and get them to the polls and really help our democracy.
Dave Hardy, it's always good to talk to you. I just be curious if whether or not this sort of push and this momentum is going to be sharpened and focused when you have your by-election to replace Mitzi Hunter in Scarborough.
It's already starting.
There you go.
So that's going to happen. The thing that this is such a good opportunity though, because there's no real party politics in the mayor, so we don't fight each other. This is one election we can all come together. Once you get down to individual ridings or wards, then you get the party politics back.
All right. Well, no matter where you are, let's get the vote out for the mayor here in Toronto next week. And for those of you who are outside of the city of Toronto and are tired of us, navel gazing and talking about it, tough. This is an important election, so we want to make sure that it's done up right. And given any history here, the person who is elected as mayor next week will not only be the mayor for the next 3 years. Incumbency being what it is, we're likely in for the long haul here for another term or two more. So we got to make a wise decision. And the only way to do that is to ensure that you get out and cast the ballot. Dave Hardy, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on Now and Next.
Cheers. Thanks, Dave.
All right, that'll do it here for Now and Next for June the 19th. Big day around here. Happy anniversary, Annie. So there you go. I'm not even sure she listens to the podcast, but, that's how we stay married, I guess. All right, we'll be back at it again right here on Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.